My production of Grease harkens back to both the original script, the original movie, and what nostalgia is for me and other people today. Grease, the movie, I think has more of an actual story, a real through line. But the musical is not about that. The musical is about gives each character sort of their moment to shine, their moment where we see what they want, where we see what they're scared about, where we see what their fantasy lives are. And it's done through music in the style of the 50s, something that I think that kids still do today. We still use pop music, rock music, maybe even country music to think about what we want or to fantasize about a life that we wish we had that we don't have in real life. Grease is about the gritty kids, the kids that weren't the the stellar athletes, that weren't the stellar scholars. Grease is instead about the sort of salt of the earth people and their shenanigans and their camaraderie. So that's what I looked at. I looked at the idea of nostalgia. I looked at what were some common themes and kind of back into my own life and about what my high school experience is like. Even though this takes place in the 1950s, things haven't changed all that much. The show began as just sort of a walk down memory lane with this sort of loose story in between. So that's what I wanted to get back to. The movie is very Danny and Sandy heavy. We think about Danny and Sandy, I think, a lot when we think about Grease. But what Grease was initially was a nostalgic look at these kids tracing a bunch of vignettes with a sort of string of a love story.
It's been done a lot, and so there are certain expectation points that people have, and so you kind of identify what are those expectations, what are the script telling us about those expectations, and then what do we have as expectations of nostalgia, what do we remember of that time period, what does going on the internet and saying 1950s, what does that draw up for people, and then finding fun ways to sort of mash those all up again into something new and different that's still built around some of these iconic moments.
It's a lot of visual communication through image research, movies, video clips, and discussing kind of ideas with the director, the scenic designer, the costumer, trying to kind of all of us build a visual language of what we think the world would exist in before anything's designed. And then we start kind of playing for a while and start building different looks, picking colors. Everyone kind of does things in different orders. Lighting design kind of comes in a little bit later and helps to kind of complement the colors of the set and the costumes and kind of brings it all together in the end.
So obviously a lot of my inspiration came from the movie. Like, while I don't take directly from it, I think it has a really big significance on this. And then the other inspiration I had was concept from our director, Casey, that was like this idea of nostalgia and like what do we believe to be true but maybe isn't necessarily true. So creating like a hyper reality of like what these people think their teenage years were like.
I would say for me the biggest inspiration came from a lot of those big band TV shows when we started, when film started becoming a thing and people had access to watching the Beatles perform, watching Elvis Presley perform, and how each of the characters kind of has their own moment where they get to be a rock star. Like, they remember themselves in high school and how it's like the best time of their lives and they're the best version of themselves and the whole world's in front of them. And so I took a lot of those shapes and ideas of these sets sitting inside of this big sound studio type of thing, and that they were all just really interesting shapes. They weren't really anything in specific, they just had a feel, kind of a vibe to them, if you will, and went from there with that. The process actually takes quite longer than I think people expect, and we try a lot of different iterations. I like to give my directors like multiple ideas that I'm pursuing, and so in this case, I sort of was able to come up with kind of three ideas, three different design directions I was going to go. I always really enjoy collaborating, and most theater practitioners will say that, but it's true because it's just more fun to create with other people's inputs and thoughts and ideas, and I just love bouncing ideas off of each other. So it was really fun to get to talk to like a team of colleagues and friends really who are really committed to the project and doing their best as well. And I would get to talk to like Emma in costumes, be like, "Hey, I have a wall that's going to be yellow, but one of your characters are doing yellow. How is this going to look together?" Or like, "How bright and flashy are you going versus how bright and flashy I'm going?" And then our lighting designer Luke would talk, and I'd be like, "Hey, can we put lights in this set? I think I really want to lean into some neon feeling," and like talking to him and seeing how far we could go with that, and having Riley on props just be like bringing me all these fantastic goofy camp things that were so great.
Music is always the most fun to explore. I had an assistant choreographer on the show who was amazing and did so many amazing things. I could tell her a few ideas and she could whip them into a really cool shape. I actually started realizing that my high school career was a little like Grace, which is kind of weird. It was fun to explore those characters, the characters that I was friends with in high school, and the characters I was afraid of in high school, and seeing them, breaking them all down to a human level. I think that even today we still take high school very seriously, like it's the be all end all. But really what these people are is they're kids, they're teenagers. Doing a show in 3 weeks is always challenging, especially a big show like Grease. There's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of moving parts in the show. So kind of having to keep on top of that and working ahead in your head while you're working on the ground with the actors and the creative team.
More so than ever that any other time that I've worked with groups of folks, like the shops and everyone working here at PRT this year has been absolutely phenomenal, and being able to hand over my work to them and just see it come alive and everybody be excited about it, and not feeling constantly stressed about is it going to be okay, just seeing how good they are and how committed they are has been really a great experience.
Something that like we've had to learn developing this timeline and budget and things like that is definitely preparing. Like while we've been building this show for 3 weeks, we've had meetings since March about Grease. Like, what do we want Grease to be? What do we want to see it to be? And once we find the people, like, how do we like quickly execute it and make sure it happens the way that we need to? Of course, though, in theater, like sometimes you just have to push through and get those expectations there. And of course, there's also resourcing that we have to consider as well during this time, and like what can we find versus like what an ideal design would be. I think a lot of changes from the renderings to the final products was the timeline and what we could find that worked best for everybody. If I had more time on this, like we would do a lot more flat patterning, draping, those kind of things, but we did not. So we did a lot of pattern work. So what kind of patterns could we manipulate to get to the final look that we could compromise on? And then also fabric selection. That's a major factor. Like in an ideal world, I would have like gone to a fabric store, found all the fabrics, and then done all these things. I actually had another person buy my fabric for me, and then they just kind of base the fabric choices off of my renderings, which is a fun collaboration in itself, but that really affects the final design from renderings to final looks.
I was in the show once. I never thought this would be a show I directed, and I'm so glad I got to direct it and choreograph it and work with the choreographer and the music director and with the amazing cast I had. It was kind of a dream coming to work every day with everybody, even though they've been working in shops and working on 3 other shows, coming in and being amped up and ready to go. I think we had a lot of fun in rehearsal, and I think the product that we came up with and the audience's response to the product, the big laughs that we got, the overwhelming applause, the hoots and hollers, I thought were just, it was just a really fun time to be in the theater. I think we live in a time where we need to laugh and we need to maybe remember some fun times, or just have a moment where we can laugh at the silliness of humanity. Um, Grease is nostalgic, yes, but at the end of the day, it is a musical comedy. It's a parody of what the 50s were. And I think that we can see a lot of, we can just sit back and listen to some awesome music and see some amazing performers act and dance and sing their hearts out and laugh.